Hello and welcome to Decoding SuperBrains with Kumaar Bagrodia. Our superbrain today is Professor Jagdish Sheth, a globally renowned thought leader who is known for his scholarly contributions in global competitive strategy, geopolitics, emerging markets, leadership, consumer behavior, and marketing. He has over 50 years of experience in teaching and research at MIT, University of Southern California, University of Illinois, Columbia, and Emory. He has published more than 300 research papers and over 30 books. Recently, Professor Sheth was awarded the Padma Bhushan by the Government of India. Professor Sheth, what an honor and privilege to have you with us, and welcome to Decoding SuperBrains.
Kumar, thank you for inviting me.
So I'll get right to it, sir. You have such tremendous experience. And what has been your key mantra to be where you are and to guide you throughout this fantastic career of yours?
Among several mantras, the one that I think has been very helpful in my own personal growth and journey is self-discipline. Self-discipline comes from learning after you're born. It's not biological, it's not genetic. It's all about learned behavior. And the self-discipline usually comes from very early socialization, either by faith in many cultures or by family, for example, sometimes the community. If you're in some type of a situation, community, family, faith are the clear anchors. Most of the aspects of self-discipline is primarily making you more efficient and effective. And in many ways, there are several ways you learn. When you're young, you're learning just by rote learning, essentially. The faith dictates you to do things, certain rituals, for example, certain belief systems. So it's really ultimately creating good habits, and those mentalizing tasks, managing anxiety that you may have, for example, on the way, and therefore create self-discipline through habit. So habit is a very key one. We look down on habits because habit looks like you have no life. You know, you're a boring person. We often say, have a life, kind of a notion. I think, but habits is a very important thing that somehow the biology and the mind has trained us to do, rituals, habits, whatever you call them. The habits primarily create boundaries. Boundaries by location, boundaries by task, boundaries by time. Compartmentalization is the word I like to use. And also it makes you make sure that you cross certain boundaries. So for example, it is a self-discipline that says, despite all of the temptations or social pressures, reference groups, friends, something you simply say, I will not do, for example, or gambling. If you cross that boundary, there may be a point of no return. So you have to learn, have an inner strength to simply say, I will not do it. In the other case, primarily you organize by time and by location and by activities. It's a three-dimensional map. So for example, when I teach, I'm in the teaching zone, that's it. I don't do research at that time. When I'm in research mode, I just do research. And the only way I have been able to manage is to compartmentalize. My writing zone is almost like an athlete getting into a zone. So I have a specific desk, I have a specific pen, I still write by handwriting rather than typing, for example, and I get into the zone. It's very important to get into the zone because the zone gets more potential out of you at that time. You're totally focused. It's like a meditation almost, in many ways. Athletes will tell you they're in the zone the day they play exceptionally well. Same thing is about teaching in my case. Same thing about consulting or advising that we do. To me, that's the aspects of self-discipline, and it is routinized. Accept routinization. So if you are a person who likes to explore newer things with unfinished tasks, you will never complete the task. I learned from a more senior colleague of mine who was fantastic. Robert Ferber was his name. And he had a clean desk. He was busier than anybody I knew. And I asked him, Bob, as we call him, how do you do it? He said, never wait for the deadline, which I had never thought of. I always used to wait for the deadline, do a crisis management, submitting papers or grading, class grading, whatever we do. And I found that I always miss the deadline. So he told me, do FIFO, first in, first out. Never wait for the deadline. As the work comes, activity comes, just getting it done, which has worked quite well for me. And as I said, I learned to compartmentalize. So that's the self-discipline for me.
That is just so fantastic coming from you. And clearly, the way you've defined it between writing, research, and teaching, even to go down to that macro level is just phenomenal. You mentioned about habit formation and, what has been your method to create good habits?
I think the best way to create a good habit is to learn over time and reduce the choices. At a point in time, you have so many choices to make. Do I do this or that? And you begin to organize through learning. Over time, you learn through experience, you create habits. It's very prevalent among people who do clinical work. Clinical people have to have a habit. Whether you are a psychologist as a consultant, for example, or you are a surgeon, for example, it's a sheer habit. And then rest of the time, discretionary. Habits without no discretionary time becomes an obsession. And of course, you become lonely inside. You need some exploration. So you have to set aside time for exploration, just like you set aside time for work. I think that's a very interesting combination, and don't allow the one to cross over into the other. So in some fashion, people say you are too much deadline oriented, which is partly true. I compartmentalize well. And the last thing I have learned over time is part of the self-discipline, but it's more than that. I found that there is no perfection in the world. And unfortunately, high-performing people look for perfection, or what we call in manufacturing Six Sigma. There is no Six Sigma of life. You are striving toward that, but you will never achieve it. So you have to have a notion to say, above a certain level, it's good, it's okay, it's fine. I will never be able to get zero defect in anything in my life. I will be making mistakes, but I'm achieving above and beyond. It is very good to set high standards. And one of the principles of self-discipline is putting higher standards on yourself compared to what the society will ask for you, work will ask for you, or the institution will ask for you. I think once you set a high bar, as it is called, you can achieve that and you go toward learning. It is okay to make mistakes. There should be an error in life, intentionally, hopefully not going out of your way to commit errors, but at least must allow the opportunity for errors to happen. As we always say, we all learn from mistakes. And this is particularly true in clinical professions.
So you have also been a huge proponent of lifelong learning. And yes. I know you read a lot as well and do a lot of research. And what is your advice and mantra on how everyone can continue to learn throughout their lives in the information overload that we live in today?
There are two principles about learning. One is a Chinese saying, which I love it, and I have in one of my books. When the student is ready, the teacher will show up. That says that you can learn from anybody. It does not have to be a guru from whom you learn, or somebody who is more experienced than you are, like among the medical profession, for example, or legal profession precedents. You can learn from your peers. You can learn from somebody who is subordinate to you. You can learn from humans, but you can learn from animals. You can learn from nature. You can learn from mountains. So learning is really something that you should not limit to, say, a person with a title, a person with accreditation is the only person that I can learn from. That to me is a very important message. So learning is just something that you enjoy. Some people enjoy work, Some people enjoy, whatever else, the music or whatever they do. I think it comes through a passion to learn, which is your mind is constantly saying, world is so large, there's so much out there, I know so little. That's one thing. The second one is that the best learners are usually what I would call deep generalists, which means they may be specialized in one topic. I'm in the management area, for example, and within management in marketing, and within marketing, my identity is consumer psychology primarily. That's my training. But then that's like a silo, that's like a T-shape. You must have a T at the same time, which may have the breadth of knowledge also. So you can converse anything other than consumer psychology in your life. The most boring parties often I find in America are the physicians' party. They always talk about nothing but medical field or immigration problems. It's getting, after a while, you say, is there something else to talk about in life, Or if they talk about politics, it's a very narrow definition of politics. So rather than more at a more philosophical, ideological level, which candidate do I want to support? Why do I want to support? I find it more boring. So best thing is to be very eclectic in the search for information. And I have very favorite places where I go for diversity of knowledge, while I'm a specialized myself. That combination goes a long way called deep generalist. I found over time that what it does is that I can connect the dots which other people cannot or should not, or cannot think about it. So I'm able to connect dots. I see something here and I connect the dot there. For example, when President Trump, while he was still a candidate, after the second debate in the Republican Party, I said, somehow he reminds me of Ronald Reagan. Nobody thought about that connection. And then I began to do more research and I found absolutely, it's almost like a Reagan era playbook, as we call it, is what it's implemented pretty much. And nobody thought the two dots can be connected. So connecting the dots becomes a very good discovery process, new knowledge creation. And that's what I enjoy doing it. I like to connect the dots. So deep generalist is the other skill set that you must have for learning.
And I think what you said is so important, because unless you have interdisciplinary learning happening constantly, you will not be able to connect the dots.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's not just interdisciplinary, it's just inter anything.
Right.
In other words, learn about cultures, learn about music, learn about something, because the dots are connected not as much between disciplines as they are with a context and a view and a perspective. If you get an aha, that's very important. How do you get an aha, Never thought about it. It's always there. As we are finding out in the space today, people never thought there were so many galaxies. They're just explorers. Today we are finding that there is so much more history of mankind. We are predating everything, and all of us were wrong in terms of who theorized about the whole thing. So I think having the discovery as a process with no judgment ahead of time, or no what we call hypothesis, preconceived views about the world, the less you are judgmental or preconceived in your mind, the better off you are. Your learning would be a lot more enjoyable even, because you'll get an aha, I never thought about it.
That is so fantastic, sir. I'm sure as somebody who has both taught many students over the years across different levels, and somebody who's as you said, in sometimes been chasing perfection, in one's scholastic career or otherwise too, we will always have moments of anxiety, some more than others. And
yes.
In today's times, I think managing anxiety and showing resilience has become important. And who better than you to learn on how to manage anxiety and how to stay resilient?
Yeah. The anxiety is very natural and surprisingly, up to a point, good both emotionally and biologically or physically. If it goes beyond an optimal level and it totally preoccupies you, it's an obsession essentially, then it is self-destructive. So first of all, you have to gauge as to when you are getting too anxious, right? It's just like a digital addiction. I know if I analyze it, I'm getting to be digitally addicted more and more, you know? And there comes a point where I need to intervene. So anxiety is the same way, primarily. What can be done? Anxiety is a mental, not as much physical. Although people are connecting biological associations, it has an impact on the stress, it has an impact on the organs and all this stuff. But basically, mentally induced state. Unlike hunger, which may be more biologically induced state. If it's a mentally induced state, more mental work is not good. The only way to compensate an overactive mind is to do more overactive body, physical work, or engage in work, do things, not think about it. Divert your attention. And I have a very important message here, especially for young generation. The first thing to divert your attention from your own anxiety, which is uncertainty about your future. You are sort of saying, what will happen to my job, you know, COVID is here now, there is no guarantee of anything, my school is online, whatever the anxieties it's created. First thing is to think about your parents. They have sacrificed so much for you to do better than they did. And therefore, what can you do to your parents right now is very important. Think about all the things you can do for your parents. If you are in the same house, there are a lot of things you can do. Rather than being a burden on parents, you can be more responsible to their needs. If you are in the same city, at least you can visit them often because they are more anxious than you are. That's very important. Related to that one, of course, is engaging into a volunteer group. It is happening right now in America with the COVID. The number of people who have volunteered their time because it's available now in many ways, or have more flexibility by time, it's mind-boggling. It's so satisfying because you will put yourself in an empathy situation of people who are even more worse off than you are. And that's very important. To get an empathy, you need to immerse into the world of more anxious people and how do you manage it. So it's a mission-oriented approach, as every faith does it, to say, to serve the society. That would be one key dimension. My second dimension is always, like anything else, have a self-help group. You need to have people who are going through the same and sharing their coping mechanisms. And one of them may strike your fancy. Some of them may say, oh, this makes sense for me. And you end up doing that yourself. That's a second. But engaging with the group, as opposed to the traditional Facebook and LinkedIn, where only we put the positive messages, this group actually says, I'm struggling now. It gets you an inner strength to do something differently. I think to me, that's a second major activity one can do. If you are not still able to do something physically, diverting your attention to some physical exercises people have recommended quite often, go to the gym, for example, and get your body going, because body then keeps you engaged, mind in a different way than worrying about your problem. That's it. People have found that evidence, actually. I think getting a mentor is also a possibility. Somebody who has more seen this before. And in the corporate world, people are waiting. More senior executives are simply saying, I'll be happy to talk to you. So getting a mentor is one more option for people who are above a certain level of, in fact, people are searching for them. It's a question of either finding them or matchmaking of some sort.
Thank you so much, Professor Sheth. You've given some amazing tips, and clearly these are in many ways pearls of wisdom coming from you on several aspects, whether it is self-discipline, forming new habits, learning for life, and of course, managing anxiety and staying resilient. And some of these are very practical, doable tips. Thank you so much for being with us on Decoding SuperBrains.
Thank you.